There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than sound, moments when you realize the world doesn't owe you meaning, and yet you are still expected to live. Jean-Paul Sartre understood that moment better than anyone. He lived through the war, through occupation, through the collapse of old gods and the birth of a hollow age. He watched humanity crawl out of the ruins of faith and tradition, clutching nothing but the raw fact of existence. And in that void, he found the most terrible and magnificent truth of all, that we are condemned to be free. This, to Sartre, is not poetry. It's anatomy. It's the structure of human existence itself. When a child is born, there is no script written for it, no meaning stamped onto its soul. There are only possibilities, infinite and terrifying. The universe offers no instructions. No one tells you how to live, what to love, what to believe in. You wake up one day and discover you are alive. And everything that happens next depends on you. This is freedom. But freedom, Sartre says, is not a gift. It is a burden, the heaviest burden imaginable. We think we want freedom. We chant for it. We fight wars for it. But what we actually crave is direction, certainty, something to relieve us from the agony of choice. Because to be free is to be responsible. And responsibility is unbearable when there's no higher authority to guide you. If there is no God, no destiny, no moral law carved into the sky, then you are the lawgiver of your own existence. There's no divine plan to fit into, no fate to hide behind. You are alone before the vast, indifferent universe, and every choice you make echoes forever in the silence of that void. Sartre wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." That sentence sounds simple until you feel its weight. It means that every day you are sculpting your own essence with your actions. You become what you choose, and you cannot escape that responsibility. There is no neutral ground. Even inaction is a choice. Even surrender is a form of decision. You cannot not choose. Even your refusal to act is a statement of who you are. That's why Sartre calls it a condemnation. Because freedom, though noble, is merciless. It never lets you rest. It holds you accountable, even when you want to disappear. There is a kind of loneliness that follows awareness. The moment you understand that there is no external source of meaning, you also realize that no one can save you from yourself. No ideology, no religion, no lover can take away the responsibility of being you. You must invent your own values, and you must do it in a world that doesn't care if you succeed. Sartre's entire philosophy is a response to this spiritual loneliness. He doesn't deny it. He confronts it directly. He says, yes, the world is absurd. Yes, existence is empty. But the human being is the creature that fills that emptiness with its own creation. We are artists painting on the void. We are poets writing meaning into chaos. Our lives are the canvas. Our choices are the brushstrokes. That is both terrifying and beautiful, because if there is no predetermined essence, then we are radically free to invent ourselves. You can become anything. You can transform your own soul. You can choose to love in a world that gives you every reason not to. You can choose courage in a universe that doesn't reward it. You can choose meaning even when nothing has meaning. But this freedom cuts both ways. If you can create yourself, you can also destroy yourself. You can choose cruelty. You can choose apathy. You can choose to live as if nothing matters, and the universe will not stop you. That is the horror and the holiness of being human. There are no cosmic consequences, only the consequences we make real. Sartre saw that most people cannot handle this kind of freedom. They run from it. They build systems, religions, ideologies, governments, all designed to give them structure, to make them feel safe. And then they tell themselves that they had no choice. They call it destiny, duty, necessity. But Sartre saw that as a lie, a self-deception born from fear. He called it bad faith. Bad faith is the quiet surrender of the soul. It's when the waiter believes he is nothing but a waiter that his role defines his being. It's when the soldier says, "I was just following orders." It's when a man stays in a loveless marriage saying, "This is my fate." Each time a human being denies their own authorship, they become objects in their own story, predictable, mechanical, safe, but in doing so, they betray their essence. They trade the terror of freedom for the comfort of illusion. They prefer a cage with rules to the open sky of responsibility. And yet, Sartre insists, the cage doesn't free you from choice. Even when you decide to obey, you are the one who chose obedience. Even when you decide to submit, you are the one who surrendered. Freedom never disappears. It only hides behind excuses. That is why in Sartre's world, there are no victims of fate, only participants in their own becoming. He saw this truth during the war, when people justified atrocities by claiming they had no choice. But the moral horror, Sartre said, was not that they had no choice. It's that they did, and they refused to face it. They chose not to choose. They chose to follow, to obey, to blend into the crowd. And that choice, the choice to surrender responsibility, is the seed from which evil grows. This is the hidden meaning behind condemned to be free. Freedom is not the absence of constraints. It is the inescapable presence of responsibility. You cannot outsource your soul. You cannot delegate your conscience. You are free to always, and therefore guilty, always. Sartre does not mean guilt in a moralistic sense, but in an existential one. We are guilty because we are aware, because we know that our choices matter, and yet we make them carelessly, because we could live authentically, and yet we pretend not to know how. Freedom gives us the power to shape reality, but also to deform it. And so every human life becomes a silent trial. Every day we are both the accused and the judge. But Sartre's vision is not hopeless. To him, despair is just another form of bad faith. If life has no meaning, that does not mean it is meaningless. It means we are responsible for giving it meaning. That is the challenge and the dignity of human existence. You are not a thing to be explained. You are a project to be lived. You are not born with essence. You must earn it. Meaning is not given. It is built. And the raw material is freedom. To live authentically, Sartre says, is to stop lying to yourself, to stop pretending you are less than you are, to look into the mirror of existence and say, "There is no script. I will write my own." That is not arrogance. It is courage, because it means facing the void without a mask. It means walking through life without the illusion of a safety net. It means accepting that everything you do, every smile, every cruelty, every act of love, defines not only who you are, but what it means to be human. Freedom is terrifying, yes, but it is also sacred, because it is the one thing that cannot be taken away. You can be imprisoned, tortured, humiliated, but as long as you can still choose how to respond, you remain free. That is Sartre's revolution, to find dignity not in submission to destiny, but in the relentless creation of self. To be human, he says, is to be condemned to freedom, and to rise from that condemnation, not by escaping it, but by embracing it. Freedom is a strange word. It shines like gold in speeches and revolutions. But when it finally lands in your hands, when the world truly leaves you alone, you realize it burns. That's the paradox Sartre saw so clearly. Freedom, the thing humanity dreams of, becomes unbearable the moment it's real. Because true freedom means there are no answers, only choices, no fixed purpose, no moral compass handed down by God or tradition, only you, standing before the abyss, forced to decide who you are without knowing why. That is the essence of Sartre's existential freedom. It is not political, it is metaphysical. You are not simply free from something, you are free to become. And that to become is infinite, terrifying, and inescapable. When people say, "I just want to be free," they rarely mean it. They want comfort disguised as freedom. They want to do what they like without consequences. But Sartre's freedom does not remove consequence. It multiplies it. Because once you realize you are the sole author of your actions, you inherit the full weight of everything you do. You become the god of your own moral universe, and the devil of it too. Sartre once said, "Man is condemned because he did not create himself, yet he is nevertheless free." It's a haunting contradiction. We did not choose to exist, yet, once here, we are responsible for everything. We didn't ask for this life, but we must answer for it. That is why freedom feels like a sentence, not a privilege, not a victory, a sentence. Imagine standing on a cliff's edge, wind screaming past your ears, below you, the infinite void, above you, the indifferent sky, and you realize you could step forward, you could jump, no one could stop you. The thought terrifies you, not because you want to die, but because you could. That moment, that trembling awareness, that is freedom. Sartre calls this feeling anguish, the dizziness of realizing that every path is open, and therefore nothing is certain. You could build a life of beauty, or destroy everything you love, and the universe would remain silent. No divine hand will intervene. No invisible script will guide you. You are alone in the authorship of your being. Freedom, in this sense, is not a door to happiness. It is the moment you realize that happiness, too, is a choice you must invent. You cannot inherit it. You cannot copy it. You must create it moment. It is the moment when consciousness turns inward and says, "Let there be meaning." It's the first act of rebellion against the absurd, the refusal to live as a machine. Animals act by instinct. Machines follow programming. But humans, we decide. Even when we obey, even when we submit, even when we fall silent, that decision is ours. That's why Sartre said we are nothing until we act. It's not what you think, not what you feel, not what you plan. It's what you choose. Freedom, then, is not a theory. It is a verb. It happens each moment you take ownership of your life. Every time you say, "This is who I am," you are performing the sacred act of creation. And every time you say, "I have no choice," you are crucifying your own soul on the altar of fear. Sartre's philosophy is not meant to comfort you. It is meant to wake you up. Because freedom is the most dangerous truth you will ever face. It strips you of illusions. It tears down every external justification, God, fate, luck, genetics, and leaves you naked before yourself. And yet, there is something luminous in that nakedness. When all illusions fall away, what remains is pure responsibility, the capacity to create, to love, to define, to begin again. That is the paradox of freedom's abyss. You fall, and in the falling, you learn to fly. Freedom will not make you happy. It will make you real. It will burn away your pretense, your borrowed identities, your masks. It will leave you raw, exposed, trembling, and alive. In that trembling lies the seed of meaning, because the moment you stop waiting for life to give you purpose, you start giving life its purpose. When you choose your path, consciously, courageously, the abyss does not disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes the background of creation, not the void of despair. To be free is not to be fearless. It is to stand at the edge of fear and still step forward, to act without guarantees, to love without certainty, to live without permission. You will fall, you will fail, but each fall is proof that you exist, that you are still choosing, that you are still becoming. That is Sartre's freedom, not a triumph, not a liberation, but a burden willingly carried, because only through that burden do we become what we were meant to be, not children of destiny, but authors of existence itself. We lie to ourselves every day, not out of malice, but out of fear. We lie because the truth is too heavy to carry. We tell ourselves we have no choice, that life just happens to us, that fate or society or God has already written the quiet script. We whisper, "It's not my fault." And for a brief moment we feel safe. But Sartre said, "Safety bought with lies is not peace, it is death." He called this condition bad faith, the quiet betrayal of the self. It's what happens when a human being runs from freedom, hides from responsibility, and pretends to be less than they are. Bad faith is not a sin of ignorance. It is a choice, a daily decision to say, "I am not the author of my life." Look closely at the world, and you will see it everywhere. The man who hates his job but says, "I have no choice." The woman who stays in a hollow marriage, whispering, "It's my duty." The student who dreams of art but studies finance, repeating, "It's what my parents want." Each of them is acting, performing a role, obeying a script they never wrote. Sartre called it living like a thing. Because when you believe your role defines your being, you've stopped being alive. You become an object, predictable, replaceable, obedient. And the worst part? You start to mistake obedience for virtue. You tell yourself that discipline, duty, and loyalty justify your surrender. But Sartre warns, there is a difference between commitment and captivity. You can dedicate yourself to something you love, or you can be enslaved by something you fear to lose. The first gives meaning, the second takes it away. Why do we choose the lie? Because the truth of freedom is terrifying. It means there are no excuses left. It means no one else can be blamed for what we have become. It means the mirror never lies, and that mirror is our life. People run from this realization into systems that promise safety, religions that explain everything, governments that decide everything, corporations that define success, social media that tells us who to envy, who to love, what to believe. Each of them whispers the same message. You don't have to think. You don't have to choose. We'll do it for you. And millions obey, not because they are evil, but because they are tired, because freedom demands too much of them, because it is easier to live by someone else's map than to draw your own. But Sartre's voice cuts through the noise. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. That is not a curse, it's a call. It's a summons to wake up, to stand up, to live deliberately. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are the architect of meaning. Your choices, not your environment, define your essence. To live in good faith, Sartre said, is not to be perfect. It is to be awake, to stop running from the weight of freedom and start carrying it with dignity, to stop saying, "I can't," and start saying, "I will." That is courage, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear write your story. Because fear will always be there. Freedom does not erase it. It demands that you face it. Ask yourself, how many times have you silenced your own voice because it didn't fit the script? How many dreams have you buried under the phrase, "maybe later"? How many times have you betrayed your own soul, politely, quietly, in the name of comfort? The tragedy of bad faith is not that it makes you evil. It makes you ordinary. It kills your uniqueness slowly, one compromise at a time, until you wake up one morning successful, respected, and empty, and you realize you've spent your whole life performing and forgot to live. Sartre believed that freedom is not what saves you. It is what tests you. Every moment you stand at a crossroads. Every word, every decision, every silence is a brushstroke painting who you are. And the truth is merciless. You cannot erase the canvas. You can only keep painting. You will make mistakes. You will fail. But those failures are proof that you are still choosing, still alive, still human. It is not perfection that defines you. It is persistence. Bad faith says, "I am this way because of others." Good faith says, "I am this way because of my choices." One enslaves, the other redeems. Freedom doesn't mean the world bends to your will. It means you accept the responsibility to act with integrity, even when the world does not care. It means you speak the truth even when no one listens. It means you choose meaning even when everything around you is meaningless. That is the essence of authenticity. To act as if your life matters, because it does. To live as if your decisions echo across eternity, because they do. You can lie to others and still be forgiven, but lie to yourself, and your soul begins to rot. That is the real punishment of bad faith. Not hell, not karma, not divine wrath, but the quiet erosion of your own being. You become hollow. You stop feeling wonder, passion, awe. You live surrounded by beauty and feel nothing, because the truth you've denied is still burning inside you, whispering, "This is not who you are." That voice will never go away. It will wait for you in the silence. It will call your name when the applause fades. It will haunt you until you answer it. But if you do, if you turn toward that voice instead of running, something extraordinary happens. You rediscover the power that you thought you lost, the ability to change, to rebuild, to start again, the courage to be honest, not with others, but with yourself. This is what Sartre meant when he said, "Existence precedes essence." You are not born with purpose. You must choose it. You are not sentenced to your past. You are free to transcend it. You are not a character written by fate. You are the writer. So ask yourself, what story are you writing right now? Is it yours or is it borrowed? Are you living in truth or in the shadow of what others expect? Do you wake up to create or to perform? Every morning, existence hands you the same question. Who will you be today? And every night, your life answers. The abyss of freedom never closes. But neither does the possibility of meaning. And meaning, Sartre believed, is born the moment you take responsibility for your freedom, the moment you stop hiding behind excuses and start creating your own soul. You are not too broken to begin again. You are not too late. You are not defined by what you've done, only by what you choose next. This is not a comforting truth. It is a dangerous one because it leaves you nowhere to hide. But that is precisely why it is sacred, because only those who face the truth can ever be free. Only those who accept the burden can ever feel light. Only those who live in good faith can ever touch grace. And so, Sartre leaves us with a question. Not to think, but to live. If there is no God to define you, will you have the courage to define yourself? Every human being carries a shadow, a quiet, heavy presence that follows us through every decision, every silence, every regret. It is not evil by nature, it is simply everything within us that we refuse to face. The shadow is built from our lies, our fears, our betrayals, both of others and of ourselves. It grows each time we say, "I didn't mean to," when we did. It deepens when we choose comfort over conscience, convenience over truth. And eventually it becomes so vast that we mistake it for fate. But Sartre reminds us, fate is only freedom denied. The shadow is not destiny. It is the mirror of our responsibility. Responsibility. A word most people fear more than death, because to be responsible is to lose the rye. We live in an age terrified of guilt, allergic to responsibility, obsessed with comfort. But you, if you've listened this far, you know that peace does not come from escape. It comes from the courage to face yourself. Sartre's fire does. Not burn to destroy. It burns to reveal, to melt away the illusions until only your true form remains. Freedom is the fire. Responsibility is the shadow. And redemption is what happens when the two finally embrace. So tonight, when the noise fades and the mirror of your soul grows still, look into your own eyes and whisper, "I forgive you." Now, let's begin again. That is not weakness. That is the birth of strength. That is the moment a human being becomes divine, not by escaping the shadow, but by transforming it into light. At the end of every journey, there comes a moment of silence. The noise of guilt fades. The fire cools. The shadow no longer chases you. It walks beside you. You are no longer asking, "Who am I?" You are creating the answer one act at a time. This is the point Sartre calls authentic existence. When a person stops searching for meaning as if it were hidden somewhere outside and begins to build it consciously, courageously from within. You have walked through the darkness of freedom. You have tasted the bitterness of self-deception, felt the sting of responsibility, and burned in the fire of truth. And now, in the stillness after the storm, you begin to see what it was all. For the pain, the loss, the confusion, they were not obstacles. They were raw materials. The universe did not curse you with chaos. It handed you the clay of creation. Sartre believed that to exist is to create. Not to create art or wealth or success, but to create yourself. Each decision, each act, each word is a brushstroke painting the portrait of your being. There is no pre-written image to copy, no divine pattern to imitate. You are the artist, and the canvas and the paint. And here lies the final paradox of freedom. You were condemned to it, and yet it is the only thing that can save you. To live authentically is to live deliberately, not drifting through life as a reaction to fear or habit, but acting from the conscious decision of your own will. Even the smallest act, the way you speak to a stranger, the way you face pain, the way you forgive, is a declaration of what kind of being you choose to be. Every time you choose truth over convenience, you sculpt your soul. Every time you choose compassion over pride, you expand it. Every time you choose to begin again, you prove that existence is not a trap. It is a canvas. But this art demands sacrifice. Because to create yourself, you must first destroy every false image you've built to please others. You must let die the person you were pretending to be. Only then can something true emerge. That destruction feels like loss, but it is not death. It is birth. The universe is reborn through you each time you act with authenticity. To be free is to be responsible, not just for yourself, but for the world you touch. Sartre wrote, "In choosing for myself, I choose for all mankind." Every act echoes beyond your life. Every decision becomes an example of what a human being can be. You are never alone in your choices. Every time you act with courage, you make it easier for someone else to be brave. Every time you choose honesty, you make it harder for lies to rule. Every time you forgive, you loosen the chains of another soul. That is how existence becomes meaningful, not by waiting for a divine plan, but by realizing that you are the plan. You are the hands through which the universe continues to create itself. The meaning you give to your life becomes the light by which others can find their own. There comes a moment when you stop asking life to be fair, and you start asking yourself to be fearless. You stop begging for meaning and begin making it. You stop praying for miracles and start becoming one. Freedom no longer feels like a burden. It becomes a kind of grace, the quiet realization that you were never waiting for permission. To live, you already had it. Look around. Everything that ever mattered, every love, every act of courage, every word that outlived its speaker, was born from this same freedom. The universe itself is a story written by beings who dared to create meaning out of nothing. And now, it is your turn. Do not wait for inspiration. Do not wait for certainty. Both are illusions. The only truth that matters is the one you live. The only meaning that endures is the one you create. The only redemption worth seeking is the one you offer to yourself and others. Your life will not be perfect. It will be real. And in that reality, raw, flawed, beautiful, lies everything sacred. You will fall again. You will doubt again. But every time you stand back up, you prove that being human is not about avoiding failure. It's about refusing to surrender your freedom. You were not born to be a spectator in this universe. You were born to be its co-author. So, write with your choices, with your voice, with your life. At the end of his philosophy, Sartre does not leave us with despair, but with power. He tells us that there is no fixed meaning because meaning is a verb, not a noun. It is something you do, not something you find. Every morning you wake up, you are handed a blank page. You can fill it with resentment or with creation, with fear or with love. The world will not choose for you. The only question that remains is, what story will you write today? Because in the end, that is all existence asks of you. To live as if your life matters. To act as if freedom is sacred. To create as if the universe depends on it, because it does. There comes a moment, after all the questioning, after all the falling and rising, when silence finally feels alive, not empty, alive. The world hasn't changed. The sky is still. Cold. The streets are still gray, but something within you has shifted. Quietly, irreversibly. You no longer beg for meaning. You begin to see it. In the way sunlight touches a stranger's face. In the tremble of your own breath. In the simple fact that you are here. Sartre said that existence has no purpose, until we give it one. But perhaps the secret was never about purpose at all. Perhaps it was about presence, to be fully awake, unafraid. Freedom once felt like fire. Now it feels like air, invisible, infinite, carrying every possibility. You breathe and you realize this is what it means to exist. Not to escape pain, not to find certainty, but to love life enough to live it without guarantees. You remember the fire, the one that burned away your illusions. You remember the shadow, the one that taught you humility. And now you understand. They were never your enemies. They were the teachers that shaped your soul. In their light, you learned the final truth, that redemption is not a destination, but a rhythm, a daily returning to yourself, a quiet forgiveness that turns survival into creation. You walk down the same street you once feared, but now each step feels lighter. You no longer ask, "What is the meaning of life?" You whisper, "I am the meaning," and in that whisper, the universe exhales. The world, indifferent and eternal, watches you with the softest smile. You are free. You are responsible. You are forgiven. You are the fire, the shadow, the creator, and the light that remains.